Oh my goodness, this is probably the first time this season, or maybe in the last few seasons, that we've had this short of a notice on a trade. I always talk about this when we're talking about trades or potential trades. These things, they don't happen in like the snap of a finger. You know, we were hearing that, Kyrie wanted out. We were hearing that Paul George wanted out and that these guys would be traded. We just didn't know when. And maybe Blake Griffin, maybe some of us could have assumed that he was going to get dealt eventually, but we really didn't know that there were talks. Like, we usually hear, these two teams are in trade talks, and it often doesn't get followed up for at least a month or so, because a lot of teams are offering for that player. Teams, they're not willing to just, deal a player after talking to one team. And maybe the Clippers have been talking to people for a while. I know that the Pistons just made Avery Bradley available, but I think it's kind of sudden because we don't usually hear about shit like this happening so quick. I would have thought that, we would hear, okay, Blake Griffin might be on the move, and then here they're talking to these teams, and then eventually, right before the trade deadline, they pull the trigger. But man, I love this. This is great. I hate waiting for these things to happen, but this just happened. I mean, we heard that the Clippers and the Pistons, they were talking. We heard that earlier today, just a few hours ago. And voila, just after 6 p.m. my time, Central Time, this thing happened. The Clippers traded Blake Griffin, all-star power forward, to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for one Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban Marjanovic, and in addition to those players, a first and second round pick. Blake Griffin, he costs quite a bit, and at first I was just really wondering. I was just looking at this trade and I was like, that doesn't really make that much sense, because the Clippers, obviously, they're trying as hard as they can to tank. They want to blow it up. They're trying to get rid of Lou Williams. They're trying to get rid of DeAndre Jordan. And they were trying to get rid of Blake Griffin, and it didn't take them long to find this deal. So Blake Griffin is dealt. They're trying to get the other guys out of there as soon as possible so they can do a full-on rebuild. And in exchange, they got Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, and Marjanovic. Not really a significant piece right there, but that first second round pick, the first pick, that's big, because that will likely be a pick anywhere between 9 and 13 most likely. So another good piece the Clippers can add to this team that I guess they're now starting from scratch, basically, with Tobias Harris as their guy for now. Obviously, that's going to change. Tobias Harris, he's a pretty young player, only 25 years old, and the only guy that I think is really that significant to the Clippers. I know Avery Bradley is a pretty good player, a guy that I always liked and said was underrated, but he's definitely not one of these guys that you really expect to see on like a rebuilding team. Sure, he can help your team out. I mean, he's definitely going to help whatever team he's on, whether that be a rebuilding team. He can help with young players. He has all the fundamentals. He plays really smart game, and people can learn a lot from him. However, he's not like, the guy that you're going to get and be like, oh my God, like we're going to build around this guy. He's a role player. And I would think that you'd see Avery Bradley on like a really good team. That's a team that he could help the most on a rebuilding team. I don't really see that same value. However, there's a good chance that he only got thrown in there just to make ends meet. The Pistons are trying to move. They were trying to move Avery Bradley, and we heard that. And, any deal that they're going to make, they're going to try to throw him in there so they can get rid of him, because they made him free for trade earlier today. They obviously wanted to throw him in there, even though I don't think it was very beneficial to the Clippers. But he wasn't really of high value at the moment, even though I'm still surprised. Like, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Andre Robertson just went down with the horrible season-ending injury, and he's your defensive guy. The Thunder could fork over some pieces and grab Avery Bradley, and he'd be like an upgraded version, a great defensive player that can also score the ball and serve as another shooter for that team. He'd actually fit perfectly on the Oklahoma City Thunder, and not just the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he's just a guy that could help out on some of these teams that just, they need a few more pieces. The Miami Heat is a team that comes to mind. Like, this is a guy that could help out a lot of teams, they don't have Deion Waiters for the rest of the season. They could use a guy like Avery Bradley. So I'm kind of surprised that he ended up going to the Clippers, because I don't think the Clippers wanted him more than some of these other teams. But to make ends meet, it makes sense. Now, we got to talk about Blake Griffin. This is a guy, it's going to be very weird to see him in a Pistons uniform. It's been quite a while since the Detroit Pistons had a star player of the stature of Blake Griffin. I mean, Andre Drummond is great, of course, but Blake Griffin, he's a guy that he's more of a household name. He's been to a few All-Star games, and man, a Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond big man duo, that could be very scary. And the Detroit Pistons, this is just a team that, I mean, they always could be good. Like, they have good players. I know Reggie Jackson had one great season, hasn't really returned to form since. He had an 18-9 season in his contract year, or maybe it was the year after he got the contract, I don't remember, but he had one big year, and he's never gone back to his old form. Stanley Johnson, the guy that in his draft class was talking about he's the best player, he hasn't done anything in the NBA, and he's a guy that I thought would be something, but he really hasn't. Tobias Harris, to lose that player for the Pistons, I don't know if that's really that big of a deal. If you get Blake Griffin back, obviously it's going to kind of reshape your team, because these are two totally different players. You're now going to play a lot bigger with Griffin and Andre Drummond. But I think that for a guy like Tobias Harris to be leaving this team, he's a young player. Not super young, but a guy that he's continuously getting better. And he's currently in the midst of his best season as a pro. His scoring has become pretty damn good. But I don't think the Pistons really feel all that bad about giving him away, because this is a Pistons team that they're 9th in the Eastern Conference. They're, again, just mediocre, middle of the pack. They don't look like they're going anywhere. They were 2nd. This is a team that was starting off very good, but they've been pretty bad for a while. They needed to switch things up, and Blake Griffin, it's a whole new change. When you get rid of Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin, that might be something that could turn this franchise around. Now, I don't know how confident I really am in Blake, to be honest. Just not really in terms of how he plays, because I know he's a great player, but the guy is so injury prone. He misses significant time every single year, it seems like. He missed time this year as well. I mean, he literally misses every single year for a good chunk. And if he's the franchise player, it's always a tough thing to have to deal with, because Blake Griffin is very injury prone. Does that stop if he moves to Detroit? Maybe, because the Los Angeles Clippers, they're a cursed franchise. They're just meant to be terrible. They're meant to have these terrible things happen. So maybe if Blake Griffin joins the Pistons and he doesn't have any injury problems, well, we know what the culprit was. But it's still Blake Griffin. You still got to be cautious, and it's still devaluing him because he's older than Tobias Harris, and he's also injury prone. And he previously has been injury prone, and we don't see any reason for him not to have to deal with issues like that in Detroit. Hopefully he doesn't, because injuries suck. Worst part of sports, but it's still something you got to think about, and it's still something that makes Blake Griffin less valuable. So now when it comes to who won this trade, yes, the Pistons got the best player in the trade, and typically the team that gets the best player in the trade wins. However, the Clippers have a pretty clear direction. They are rebuilding, they're trying to get rid of everybody, and they acquired a pretty good pick from the Pistons in order to do that. Tobias Harris as well, a really good young player, and, honestly, Blake Griffin, for the Clippers, they didn't even want him. They wanted to get rid of him, and I think that for their own sake, they did well in this trade. How high is Blake Griffin's value really? I mean, he's a guy that's been in the league for a while. He's not old. He's in his prime of his career right now, but he's injury prone. He's someone that used to rely on athleticism, but has kind of rebuilt his game as more of a skill type player, which is great because he's now relying on, his jump shot more and his passing ability and just his overall IQ to beat defenders instead of his athleticism, which will help his injury problems for sure if he's not straining his body as much. But I gotta say, I don't think Blake Griffin is a sure thing in terms of he doesn't want to stay with this franchise. Is he your number one guy for the future? Him and Drummond can make a hell of a duo, but you don't have enough right now to contend. Not even close. You need to get rid of some more players. Reggie Jackson, Stanley Johnson, guys like that, they got to go. You got to rework the chemistry. You got to rework the whole team in terms of their attitude and their ability and desire to play with each other, because the Detroit Pistons, they're just not happy. It doesn't seem like they're always mediocre because they're talented enough, but they have a bunch of guys that always seem to have problems, whether it be, playing together or just being consistent. So I think that they got to kind of rework what they're doing. Blake Griffin, it's a start, but I don't think they're done. To be honest, I think that it's a clear win for the Clippers. Clearer win. I'm not going to say clear win. I'd say the Clippers, they know what they're doing, and they made the move that they wanted to, and they got some decent pieces in return for Blake Griffin. I think that's great. For the Pistons, they got Blake Griffin. They now have just such a dangerous duo in terms of their big men. However, they have a lot more work to do. This is the start of something, but the Pistons are not done dealing. They shouldn't be, at least. They should keep looking for more trades because I think this is a decent start if they want to, try to build something with Drummond, Griffin, and maybe some of your other players that have been playing well. But I don't know. Let's see what happens. But yeah, I'd say Clippers took this for the moment, but we'll see. I mean, it really, trades often depend on the aftermath. They usually do. So we'll see. That's it. I'm out. Thanks for watching, y'all. Peace.